under the control and direction of the masses of people. So we want to start by just acknowledging something that you more than likely didn't hear in the news because, you know, the capitalist news doesn't report anything of any significance. But one of the things that happened this past week is that in Guinea-Bissau, the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC, of which the APRP is fused with, won the parliamentary elections in Guinea-Bissau, which means that the PAIGC essentially has governing control in Guinea-Bissau. And the president of the PAIGC, Brother Domingos Piera, who actually handed me my PAIGC membership when I was in Guinea-Bissau in January, he will become the prime minister of Guinea-Bissau. So this is a fundamental victory for revolutionary Pan-Africanists around the world. This is one of many efforts that we intend to make to gauge the waters and seize state power, because that's what's happening, and use that to advance our struggle for Pan-Africanism, right? So this is a day for celebration. It's a wonderful day for Pan-Africanists, and we're glad you're here. So we'll start. We'll just give honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, as we always do, and honor to our African ancestors. And there's no better manifestation of that than the work taking place in Guinea-Bissau with our sibling party there, the PAIGC. So just wonderful that we can continue to build on this work. I'm just feeling good about it. Had a wonderful work study yesterday with the new work study that I am helping to build here in Sacramento. So victory is on the horizon, you all, very much so. So glad that you're here with us, and we'll just start with our basic introductions as we always do and get on with that. And so as soon as my screen cooperates. And so our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the APRP. And the APRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, Pan-African political party that is based in Africa. Our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one unified socialist Africa. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. And, you know, groups like the PAIGC are certainly in the forefront of that work to lead towards an all-African Committee for Political Coordination, which would serve as the government entity that would unite all of the revolutionary Pan-African formations into one political body. And once that body is one body, that would be the All African People's Revolutionary Party in its adult stages, in its complete stages. That's why we always say we're building the party. And then once we have that, then we would have the creation of the All African People's Revolutionary Army, which would be the army that would drive out the neo-colonialists, the imperialists, and would assist in our efforts to fight imperialism worldwide. So that is our work, you all. And our Ancestors' Voices, like we mentioned, is just one of the many programs the APRP sponsors to spread the word about our work, to bring about one unified socialist Africa. And this particular program is sponsored each week, same time, same place. As I mentioned, this is our 160th episode. So that's how long we've been doing it, since March of 2020, every week. And myself and Shakura, both of us active organizers within the AAPRP, continue to hold this down, and will continue to do so as long as we have breath in our bodies. And so to get us started on our topic this week, reclaiming Juneteenth, I will turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Thank you, kind sir. Appreciate that. Greetings, everyone. As always, we hope that you are safe and well. So we wanted to start by being mindful of really breaking down what these terms mean, because I think that for a lot of us, we make assumptions that everybody knows what these terms mean, and we all have different learning styles. We all have been poisoned by capitalism. on different levels. And some of us have more of an understanding than others based on our political education and the organizations that we're involved in. And so, of course, if you are not familiar with Juneteenth, the backwards imperialist capitalist argument is that this is supposed to be an acknowledgement to the end of slavery for African people. And evidently, this idea took place where, because of Juneteenth, people were able to say that, quote, slavery was over for Africans. And so let's really break that down. And so continuing to think about that on a more time scale, if you will, we're talking about the 1863, so the early 1860s, all the way up to the 1970s. And so even though slavery was apparently over, we still had Jim Crow. We still had other systems in play. We even had people writing about it, like W.E.B. Du Bois, where he breaks down in The World of Africa, and the title has been amended to The World of Africa and the Color of Democracy. But the book originally was titled The World of Africa, where he talks about all these different examples of slave revolts. And so you have these constant examples of Africans who fought back, and Africans who did not just take their brutality standing up or laying down or sitting down, for that matter. Like, we will never know how many Africans had to do some of the most dangerous tasks in terms of poisoning the slave master. We'll never know how many of our African comrades who were non-males had to endure being raped so that they could put toxins and things in the other person's drink and whatnot. We'll never know all the things that we did to fight back. We will never know that, because for a lot of us, we're not going to pick up The World in Africa. So we're not even going to be able to understand and see it on one page just how many times we fought back, to the point where slave masters were getting frustrated because they were running out of options to contain us. That's how much this is such a big deal. And so we have to think about that on a much larger scale, because even with the slave revolts, and even with Juneteenth, we still had Africans and other colonized people experiencing institutionalized systems of oppression. And so you should ask yourself, well, what is institutionalized oppression? Well, it's where you have a system that perpetuates oppression on an institutional level for folks to experience. So that could be anything from functioning day-to-day tasks, walking in a store and being criminalized because you're automatically assumed to bring harm to yourself, going into a different space and people making assumptions about you based on how much money you have, your class status, how many children you have, based on whether or not you identify as a non-binary African or an African male or an African female, assuming that you don't have stable income, assuming that you don't have good credit. You can see this in employment. And I mean employment as in trying to actually secure a livable wage employment as an institutionalized form of oppression. But I also mean employment in terms of having the ability to have sustainable income, where by the time you retire, as my dad always says, you have the ability where you don't have to go back to work at the age of 80 something and work at McDonald's, because you've been able to accrue enough resources financially where you can stabilize yourself. Being able to look for what it means to have financing options and not being assumed that you will not pay back your loans or whatever that looks like. These are all different forms of oppression. We don't just see that in employment or financing or even in mass incarceration, because we know there are stark disparities in mass incarceration, but you all hear me talk about health disparities all the time. You hear me talk about mental health disparities all the time. And all of this is a result of institutionalized oppression. There is no way, it is impossible for you to live in this world and there not be at least one thing wrong with you. You know how I know? Because capitalism tells you every single day that you're a problem. Capitalism tells you every single day that there's something about you that is not right. Capitalism lets you know that because you have a learning disability, you don't think right, or because you have ADHD or you were depressed, you don't know how to manage your emotions. Your teeth are not white enough. Your hair is not straight. Your hair is too straight. Your hair needs to be more curly. You don't have the right car. You need to buy a better car that's more expensive, even though you can barely afford the one you have. You don't even put the right kind of gas in your car. You need better gas in your car, and you need to have a better, bigger house. And why are you still renting? You should be owning a house right now. I mean, there's all this different rhetoric every single day. You don't even know what kind of diapers to buy your child because there are different diaper commercials every second telling you that you're not buying the right diapers for your children. So there's all these messages that are based on toxic BS telling us every single day that we're not enough. And so you can't tell me that that is not a form of institutionalized oppression, where because we are experiencing these things on a day-to-day basis, especially if you add in the fact that we happen to be of African descent, and so therefore we are colonized, we're at a crossroads where we have to function in a society where we don't feel like we fit in, but yet we've been kidnapped and brought to said place. And now we're trying to figure out our way around when really this was never designed for us because we were never supposed to be here. This is not our land. This is not our land. This is not our society. We have our own society and our own African nation that we need to attend to. And so these institutionalized forms of oppression have constantly been a reminder that the question really remains, if Juneteenth is supposed to acknowledge the end of slavery, then why does institutionalized oppression still exist? That's really what the question brings. If slavery was supposed to be the big bad system that brought all of these bad treatments into our sphere, then why, because quote unquote slavery is over, then why are we still experiencing these things? And so I appreciate being a part of work study, which is a branch of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And so therefore I'm able to organize with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, because it is being in these spaces with AAPRP members that I am hearing terminology such as, oh, well, are you available on Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning? Oh, no, African, I have to go to the slave that day. Or, oh, it's 5 o'clock. Are you off work? Yes, I am off from the slave today. I don't have to go in tomorrow because tomorrow is a holiday. You know, neutralizing these words, normalizing these terms so that we are very familiar that it is still, in fact, a form of slavery. And if you really break it down, the bottom line is your class status has everything to do with how much respect you earn in this world. And so if you have a career where you have a livable wage and where you make income that is quote unquote acceptable, then you're at a position where you're highly respected, and it becomes sure that, you know, you have what it takes and you've worked hard and you've done all these things. But really the bottom line is, if you decide just to not go to work for a whole month, at some point your benefits are going to run out. And at some point, you're not going to be able to not go back to work. You're going to need to go to work, because every single one of us who chooses to have a roof over our head, who chooses to have options when it comes to the food choices we endure, who chooses to have functioning electricity in our domiciles, who chooses to have pets or children or dependents of other types that need our income so that they can eat. At some point, you will need to go back to work, because you cannot live in capitalism without perpetuating that system. It is nearly impossible. And if you do it and you can find a way to do it without ever working a day in your life, let us know, because we are interested. We would love to have the cure for all things if we could figure that out. But that's simply impossible. Capitalism doesn't work that way. You were born to perpetuate capitalism. You just didn't know it when you came out the womb. So there's no way that you're not going to be able to work your behind off and not give the system what it's asking for. That's impossible. That's like holding your breath and still expecting to be able to breathe clearly. It's literally impossible. So we have to think about that in more context, because the question remains, is slavery really over? And you can break that down metaphorically, you can break that down physically, you can break it down spiritually. We really don't have a preference. The answer is no, it's not. Because we're all mandated to go to a special system that gives us money for exploiting our labor every single day. None of us have livable wages, because we're all living paycheck to paycheck. And some of us are so far down, we can't even afford to even think about where the next meal is going to come, because we're not even sure. So therefore, none of us are in a space where everything is good. And this is why none of us should be protecting capitalism. But we'll get to that in a second. Next slide, please. Okay, so if we think about this a little bit more clearly, we have to, you all, we have to. This is why we are our ancestors. This is why. The Haitian Revolution is a beautiful example of why we should be grateful that not only are we related to these brave African soldiers, but beyond that, we have their blood in our veins. It's running through, it's coursing through as we speak, their language, their ideology, it is in us. We just have to tap into it. African people anywhere in the world should not just be acknowledging the Western slave situations, but we should be thinking about what was going on with slavery in the Caribbean and how we were fighting back. We should be thinking about what was going on with slavery in South America and Central America and how we fought back. As I said, W.B. Du Bois gives numerous examples in the world in Africa. He talks about the revolt in San Domingo, the revolt in Mexico, the revolt in Peru, the appearance in the Maroons. He gives credit to the Baiano revolt in Central America. These are just different examples that I'm pulling from the world in Africa, now amended to say the world in Africa and the color of democracy, but written by W.B. Du Bois. And of course, he also admits to the Haitian Revolution as well. And so just thinking about that in more context, I think is really important, because there's a reason that we have always not been okay with being disrespected. And unfortunately, this particular story of us fighting back has not been as commonly spoken of, written of, as much as it has been spoken of that we did not fight back. So because we have the information that we have, we know that the Haitian Revolution was a critical moment where Africans were given permission to say, not today. You are not going to disrespect us anymore. And not just that particular moment in time, but we did it over and over. We did it over and over. Du Bois starts out by talking about how we were fighting in 1522 and goes on to the next page where he's saying that we continued to have revolts in 1895. So from 1522 to 1895, Africans everywhere were saying, no, we're not doing it. And you can't make us. And if you try to make us, you're going to go down and we're going to go down too. Or maybe we're going to come up on top, but you're going to go down, but we're not doing it. And so this is why increasing your political education is so important. So important. Because if you are not picking up books where they are talking about slave revolts, then how are you going to have your facts and be able to articulate yourself later when somebody comes at you and brings some stupid rhetoric that you know is simply not true, talking about Africans didn't fight back? How is that possible? How is that possible? All of us literally would not be here if none of us had fought back, because if none of us had fought back, then the reproduction wouldn't have taken place. So biologically, that's impossible. That is simply impossible. So we have to think about that, and we have to give nod. We have to give nod to our Haitian Revolution ancestors, give nod to the bravery that they displayed, give nod to how it's because of them and because of the Maroon rebellions. We have to give nod to these things about how all of this made us who we were. And some of these folks may have been in organizations that were working for justice. Yes, some of them may not have been. But the point is, they all understood that they had to collectively come together, which means in itself, that means they're fighting for one unified front. They may not have all agreed. They may not have all spoke the same language. They may not have all chose the same food choices or had the same interest in other people sexually. None of that matters. What matters is that they all understood that they needed to come together if they wanted to win and if they wanted to stop slavery. That is the bottom line. And so we have a different looking type of slavery in 2023. It doesn't look the same way it looked in the 1500s or in the 1600s for that matter. It, looks a little bit different. But the aim and the intention should not change at all just because the image is different. We should still be coming together because we still have one unified front. And so you can start by joining an organization that is working for justice, because Africa is a very big continent. And the last time I checked, I can't help Africa be free by myself. You certainly can't do it either. We have too many different neo-colonialist and colonization policies that have been in place for many, many years, where we're not going to be able to overturn those by ourselves. We're not even going to be able to overturn those by 20 people or by 50 people or by 1,000. It's going to take all of us, you all. So again, we're going to have to put aside our petty differences. We're going to have to put aside our sexual preferences. We're going to have to put aside how we raise our children. We're going to have to put aside whether people like dogs versus cats. None of that matters. What matters is Africa needs to be free, because the question remains, Juneteenth was supposed to commemorate the end of slavery, but as I humbly just tried to point out to you, slavery is not over. in 2023. But freeing Africa will help slavery to be over. Because if Africa is free, then the African people will be able to yield respect and have control of their resources and determine how those resources get disseminated and sold so that we can bring money back to the continent and we don't have to worry about having other people rob and rape us every single day for our own resources. The first step to this junction is joining an organization that is working for justice. Then you can build up your political education. And then maybe, just maybe, Africa will have a fighting chance. Asante Sana.
Asante Sana, obrigada, midasi. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I just really think that the key points that you made, particularly about the Haitian Revolution, are a great stepping stone to facilitate where we'll go with the rest of this program. So I want you all to just try to maybe go even deeper and talk about some of these elements. And first, we'll start by saying, absolutely, Juneteenth, like all of our commemorations against slavery everywhere, because, you know, African people have commemorations against slavery all over the Western Hemisphere, not just in the United Snakes of America. So we have to broaden our perspective, as Shakur mentioned. So Juneteenth is the perspective that is commemorated here in this backward country. But it's important for us to say that we think these commemorations have great value. We're not in any way saying today that we should not be acknowledging Juneteenth. I know that I myself grew up as a child commemorating Juneteenth. It was the only thing that I knew at that time. I didn't know anything about African Liberation Day or Africa or that I was African or anything. So Juneteenth was really the first cultural manifestation that I came to understand. And by cultural manifestation, I mean the definition of culture provided to us by Ancestor that talks about culture as a tool for liberation, culture as a tool for dignity. So Juneteenth was the first thing that went against the grain, went against the I pledge allegiance to the flag nonsense that we were taught in school. And the Juneteenths that I attended as a child were always sponsored by our community organizations. They were never sponsored by corporations back in those days, in the early 70s. They were never sponsored by those people. They were always sponsored by our people. So we just want to make that clear. That's the statement we're making. Juneteenth is a very positive manifestation if African culture controls it and African people direct it. Let me say that one more time. Juneteenth, like any institution, is very positive as long as our people control and direct it. And, you know, we know the primary purpose of history isn't just to fill your head with knowledge so you can know more than the next person and look impressive and sound impressive, but the sole purpose of history is to prepare us for the future, right? If you're riding a bicycle and you're not paying attention to where you're riding and you hit a lump in the road and you go over the handlebars and you injure yourself, the entire the positive that comes out of that is that hopefully the experience, that history of what you experience going over the handlebars helps you understand, oh, I need to pay better attention next time so that does not happen to me ever again. So this is the purpose of history. Otherwise, what other purpose does it serve if not to help us prepare to improve our future? And our struggle and our commemorations that recognize our struggle have to always be international in scope. Like, we can never just fall for this capitalist propaganda here in the United States that we're Americans and that's all we need to look at is what's happening in America. And what about the Africans in Mexico or Guatemala or Belize or El Salvador or Dominican Republic? Oh, we don't need to worry about them. They're different than us. That is the narrative coming from our enemies. And we are fools if we accept, as our sister Sada Shakur said, only a fool lets their enemy define their enemies for them. So we can't do that. We have to look at the world scope and African people all over the world, because that is the reality of how we got in the situation we're in today, is what happened when the colonizers came to Africa and the system they set up, which spread us all over the world to work for free and build the wealth for the development and the maintenance of the capitalist and imperialist systems. So if you don't have an international perspective to analyze that, there's no way you can understand what I just said. And if you don't understand what I just said, then that's how people get stuck in this nonsense cycle of, well, really what we're fighting for is a paycheck from the master, calling it reparations. You know, if you only have an American perspective, then you see yourself as an American and you see, well, America made a mistake, but this is my country. So to correct the mistake, I just want to sell out and get paid by the slave master. And you think that that's a progressive statement in the struggle. So that's why our struggle has to always be international in scope. And our commemoration should always be 100% focused upon our complete and uncompromising liberation as African people everywhere. Or in other words, any commemoration we have as a people that is not uplifting our culture as a tool for liberation is a farce. It's a farce, you all. Any commemoration we have that is not focused on the liberation of our people, in other words, any commemoration that's framing our conditions as one of recognizing the individual advancements of individuals within the bourgeoisie capitalist system, like Juneteenth is about Kamala Harris being vice president, when that has no impact on the masses of African people anywhere on earth, that's a farce. The only way that a commemoration has any value for us as oppressed people is if that commemoration is used to inspire us to continue our struggle for liberation and forward human progress, not to inspire us to want to become individual advanced within the capitalist system. That's a agenda of our enemy. That's not our agenda. So we have to state that clearly. That's the purpose of these commemorations. And our challenge and our problem, right? Like you see the picture on the screen, if you're looking at it, like Juneteenth, you know, we got to understand the capitalist system. And most of us, unfortunately, don't understand this system. We don't understand how it works. We don't even understand what it is. And then on top of that, we don't understand how it functions. We don't understand how it manipulates us. And we don't understand the reasons why it manipulates us. We think that we're free thinking people, that we think for ourselves, and that we understand everything that's happening. But yet, if you walk down the street and you just randomly interview us, and I don't just mean Africans, I mean everybody. You know, a lot of people are doing this. Like if you look at TikTok videos, people will name a city in Africa and they'll talk to nobody can do it. Nobody can name a single city in Africa because ignorance is a premium in this society. They'll go down the street and they'll ask people, so explain what was the reason behind the war with Iraq. No one can do it. Who was the lead? Even just basic stuff. You all like, who was the leader of Iraq when the US was at war with Iraq? And people will say, well, Osama bin Laden. The ignorance is at a premium in this society. So the reason why that's the case is the capitalist system understands clearly that in order for it to persevere and maintain its dominance, they have to be able to continue to rape Africa's human and material resources blind, as well as everybody else's human and material resources. But this capitalist system was built on exploiting Africa, and it's still largely maintained upon exploiting Africa. It's not maintained upon exploiting the Americas. It's maintained upon exploiting African resources. It was built based on the slave labor of kidnapped Africans. That's irrefutable. It's not putting anybody else down or not recognizing their contributions. That's just an objective fact. The capitalist system, the world's dominant economic system in the world today, got its start from the seed money supplied by the transatlantic slave trade. That's an objective fact that nobody can refute. So that if that's true, and there's no question that it is, then there's no problem with us saying that capitalism was developed based on exploiting Africa. There's absolutely no question about that. That there's no question that that's true. So the capitalist system understands that, even if most of us don't. They do understand that. And so that's why they know their task is to keep the masses of African people confused about who the hell we are. Because if we're just thinking, well, I'm Puerto Rican and my only allegiance is to Puerto Rico, well, I'm African American, my only allegiance is to the red, white, and blue. I'm Canadian, I'm Black African Canadian, my only allegiance is to the red and white. Then as long as they can keep us confused like that, I'm Kenyan, my only allegiance is to the Kikuyu or the Maasai. Then as long as they can keep us in that limited, narrow perspective of the world, then they know that they never have to worry about us waking up any day and saying, you know what, how is it that all of these resources that make the world run come from Africa like us, but yet we don't control any of that? We'll never ask that question. We'll never ask that question because we'll be here thinking, well, I'm African American, so America's the strongest country in the world, so I'm good. All I have to do is protect America. And anybody comes along talking about, well, we're actually Africans and we should be thinking about African liberation. Oh, that's the enemy. Massa, please, Massa, give me a gun. I'll shoot them. I'll shoot them Negroes because they the enemy. That's how that's how they got us thinking. So the capitalist system is doing its job, you all. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do and what it's organized to do. And so one of the other components of that is they recognize that oppression breeds resistance. Even though most of us don't recognize that, they do. So because they recognize that, they see elements arise within our culture that are designed to uplift us as a people towards liberation. And they recognize those Juneteenth commemorations I mentioned to you back in the 70s that were sponsored by, I grew up in San Francisco, so they were sponsored by groups like the Pan-African People's Organization, you know, which was very active in the Bay Area at that time. Groups like that, various groups like that, coalition of groups, the Nation of Islam, all of these groups came together and were co-sponsoring Juneteenth, and it was in a park, and there were no corporate entities in that park. They wouldn't have been allowed. And so as a result of that, they could say whatever the hell they wanted to say. And they talked about the liberation of our people, and there'd be thousands of people out there. Yeah, they had music. I remember I'd go to Juneteenth, and I remember I had one year, I think it was 1980, I had just bought the Cameo album, Cameosis. And Cameo is one of my favorite groups then and still is today. And they had just come out with the album Cameosis, and everybody was playing it in our cars, our houses, at the house parties, which were popular then everywhere. And I remember at the Juneteenth, they put on the song Shake Your Pants, which was a popular song off of that album. And everybody was jamming to it. And as soon as that song went off, the African came up and started talking about our liberation. And I didn't understand that then. I was like, why, man, keep playing more music. I want to hear the Barcades, Parliament Funkadelic. Why is he talking? But we know that everything is dialectical. So even though I wasn't conscious of it, obviously the fact that I'm here today doing what I'm doing today, some of that seeped through. I know it did. And so that was a very positive institution. And we had a number of them back at that time. So my point is the capitalist system realizes this, you all. So they know they're not going to stop our spirit of resistance. So instead, they strategize to get out in front of us. And instead of them trying to squash Juneteenth, they do everything they can to take control of it. That's their strategy. So as the picture on the screen says here, right here, CBS and all these corporations, they sponsor Juneteenth. They give it money. They give the organizers money. And that way they can control the content. There are no Africans getting up. I guarantee you, I don't know anything about this picture on the screen, but I guarantee you one thing, nobody's going to get up at that event and talk about how we need to organize and overthrow the capitalist system. If you're in Tampa, Florida, and you're going to that event, I'll bet you money that nobody gets up there and does that. And if they do, they're not going to be allowed to talk for very long. I can tell you exactly what's going to be said at that event. They're going to get up there and talk about how it's so great. We got to get more Negroes in college, get college degrees, create more Barack Obamas and Kamala Harris's and Cornel West and all of these other sorry Negroes. And that's what they're going to talk about as being the definition of progress. And we're going to hear that. And because we don't have a spirit of liberation, we're going to, yeah, that's what we need to do, is get more Negroes in these college degrees and have them working in the Democratic Party and working to uphold America and make America strong, keep America strong. That's what we need to do. But put a black face on a strong America. And well, what about the indigenous people? Oh, the hell with them. They couldn't hold it. That's their problem. Well, what about all the people that are impoverished? What the hell with them? They're in that situation because they didn't work hard enough. Well, what about all the houseless people? The hell with them. They're in that situation because they just ain't blessed by God the way we are. That's exactly what the capitalist system wants us to do. And you all, I'm here to tell you, millions of us are doing exactly that on some level or another. You all know the majority of our people are not saying, why the hell is CBS sponsoring our Juneteenth commemoration? If we were, we would go to events like this. And it's not, I'm not just picking on Tampa because this is everywhere. This is happening. This is the first one I found for the presentation today. I could have done it for any city. Some cities where you're in, they're doing the same thing. These damn corporations are sponsoring it. And I guarantee you, if we were conscious the way we need to be, we would run when they get up there. We want to thank CBS and the damn CBS person that we run up there and knock him or her or their ass off the stage and take control of the event. If we started doing stuff like that, then we would say, okay, now we're thinking in our right mind. But as long as we're sitting there clapping for that and trying to get that money from CBS, clearly that's evidence that we ain't in our right minds. So like most of our institutions under capitalism, today, because of this process I just described, we don't control Juneteenth. We don't even have any idea how we would control it, because as Shakur brings up constantly, most of us are not in organized struggle. So we're not in organized struggle, so we don't even understand. We think that, okay, Wells Fargo has an event, and they're having one here where I live next weekend. And they got Club Nouveau performing. You know Club Nouveau. Look at all these rumors. Flying here every day. That's a band that's from this city, Sacramento. And all the other songs they had, I can't even remember the other ones, but good band. You know, I love the band. I want to go out there and listen to them, but I'm not confused. Even when I'm out there grooving the Club Nouveau, I want to try to take some propaganda to pass out or do something to advance the notion of what the hell Juneteenth should be. It's not this corporate sponsored event. It can't be that. But right now, that's what it is. We don't control it on any level. And these multinational corporations control Juneteenth, as I mentioned, as their strategy to control and shape our aspirations. They control it as their strategy to control and shape our aspirations. In other words, they use these institutions to frame us to become good slaves in this system. You can even be a militant American as long as you're an American. You could be like, oh, I want to get Trump out of office. Damn, I hate Trump. As long as your only solution is we got to get the Democratic Party version of Trump, because that's all Biden is just I years ago, I had the analogy. I said, if the Democratic and Republican Party, it's like going to a dance, and you go up to the Republican Party person and you say, hey, would you like to dance? Oh, hell no, get the hell away from me. And then you go up to the Democratic Party person, hey, would you like to dance? Sure, I'll dance with you, just wait. I just need to get something to eat. You go back later, would you like to dance? The Democratic Party person, yeah, now I need to just get a drink. You go back later, oh, my feet hurt. By the time the dance is over, they never danced with you. They just kept you on a string, promising you stuff that they never delivered on. So as Malcolm told us correctly, the Democratic Party is the fox. If you know how a fox hunts, they hunt very slick. They're very slick when they hunt. Their strategy is to make the prey think there's no danger. And when the prey relaxes themselves completely, then they pounce on them and take them. Whereas a wolf charges straight for the prey and just takes it. They don't play no games like the fox. They don't do all that. They don't have that strategy of making the prey relax. They just go and overpower them. So Malcolm talked about the Democratic Party is the fox and the Republican Party is the wolf. Both of them canines. Both of them will eat you at the end of the night. And our people, we don't understand that. I mean, that's irrefutable what Malcolm told us 50 damn years ago, and we still don't understand it. We don't understand what I just said, even though we cannot refute it, we'll still argue against it because we're so loyal to this system because it's all we know. That's the only reason why we're loyal to it, is because it's all that we know. And we feel like if we don't have this, we won't have anything, because the master's propaganda has been very effective in convincing us that all we have to look forward to is their slave plantation. And I don't care what the hell people say, because I've heard it all. The overwhelming majority of us believe that. We believe that. We believe the slave plantation is all that we have. And that's why we defend it. That's why we defend it no matter what it does. And by defend it, I mean, that's why we won't do anything to overthrow it, because we feel like it's the best option that we have. And one of the major ways that these corporations do this is they convince us that progress in the capitalist system, again, is defined by individual advancement. So they know that the system of capitalism is designed to keep the majority of us oppressed. So they always jump ahead of us because we're not looking ahead. So they jump ahead of us and they create a propaganda narrative that justifies why only a few of us are able to squeeze through and make it within the capitalist system. And that narrative is that, well, the rest of us that aren't making it, we're not working as hard as we need to work. And if we don't believe in God strong enough, and all this other backward nonsense that so many of us believe. And you hear it, you know, this individualism that capitalism promotes, because individualism is not a manifestation of African culture. That is not a manifestation of who we are as African people. So this individualism where we see everything only through the perspective of ourselves and our families, that's a foreign concept that's been forced upon us by our enemies. That is not the philosophy of our culture. But since it's dominant, our enemies' philosophy is dominant within us. So we sit here today and we say, well, okay, my kids made it through college. I made it through college. I got this house. I got that. People need to be more like us. That's how we see it. And we don't even see the system of oppression. You know, people tell me all the time, I used to have people tell me this. They'd be like at these jobs, you know, that I work. I always be the only African. And they'd say, yeah, and you're different. You're different. And I tell them every time, no, I'm not. That one you saw on TV this morning that they were saying and committed those crimes, don't separate me from him. I just need to connect with him and work with him. That's it. And turn him against you and your system that you believe in. That's all that needs to happen with him. But don't separate me from him. I'm not apart from him. I am him and he is me. Because the only reason why I wasn't on TV like him was just luck. I'm telling you all the truth. Only luck is the reason why I wasn't on there, because he ain't did nothing that I didn't do. So I understand how this system works. And I'm not confused, and they're not going to confuse me about who I am with this bourgeoisie nonsense. Well, they haven't worked as hard as you. That's a bunch of absolute nonsense. If you want to see the hardest working people on the planet, go and watch the people doing the lowest paying jobs, and you'll see the hardest working people. No question about that. So progress can always only be measured by the collective progress, and collective progress is impossible within the capitalist system. So in other words, we have to move beyond this backward interpretation that progress is defined by individual advancement within the capitalist system. Only the collective advancement of our people can be the definition of any barometer of progress for our people, because our people have been oppressed collectively. So how the hell are you going to say we're progressing when only 2 or 3 Negroes made it through? One Negro became president and couldn't even speak out forcefully for his own people. And you want to tell me that's progress? I could do without that. I don't need that. I don't need him to stand up there and placate white America. I don't give a damn about that. How the hell is that help? Tell me how that's helping our people to have him up there when he was up there telling African men that we need to take care of our kids, like all white men take care of their damn kids. That's the insult. And I'm not mad at him for saying that, because he's a part of the bourgeoisie system. That's his job to do that, to control his people. That's why they let him in there, is so he could control our people, because we were pissed after George W. Bush. And that's the only reason why his black behind got there in the first place. So I'm not mad at him. I am frustrated with us because we're so naive and gullible and easily fooled by this nonsense. That is the problem. And we can't even see through it. How the hell are you going to get up there? You ain't say, he did not, in 8 years, he didn't say one thing against white people. Not once did he tell them, y'all stole this country. He didn't say that one time. And you telling me, oh, that's progress to have him in there. You're out of your damn mind. Not once did he say, well, you know, this country was built on stolen land, and until Africa is redempted from the 500 years of colonialism, it will never be correct. Not once did he say that. Instead, he took his black ass to Africa, and he went to Ghana and told our people in Ghana, you cannot keep blaming colonialism for your problems. Go straight to hell with that. If you think that, go straight to hell with that. That is the enemy's propaganda that is designed specifically to keep us in this slave mentality that so many of us are in. So that is what the capitalist system does. It tells us that progress is individual advancement. That is a lie. The only way progress can ever be defined is collective advancement. And the way we proceed is we have to have dignity, you all, and we can't participate in the capitalization of Juneteenth or any of our commemorations. We have to go back to the independent, smaller commemorations that we can control, and we can get the money from our people to build it, so that when we organize this, only the people is the only entity that we're responsible for. We could do whatever we want, like African Liberation Day, but they try to co-opt African Liberation Day. I remember years ago, me and 3 or 4 comrades were in a Kinko's. This is when Kinko's used to be open 24 hours. It's a printing shop for those of you that don't live in the backward cesspool empire known as the United Snakes. I don't know if they're international or not, but if you don't know what that is, they're a place where you can make copies and do printing. And we were in there at about 2 in the morning. And the reason why we were in there is we had figured out a way to make free copies. And I'm pretty sure the fact that they're not open 24 hours anymore is probably largely because of what we were doing, because we were making thousands of copies for our APRP work. And we'd be in there at 2 a.m. And at one time we were in there and we were running 4 copiers at the same time illegally, right? And here come the European, the manager in there. And he came over to us and we were like, uh-oh. And we had already planned, like we would just grab what we could and bounce out the store, right? So we were ready to do that. And he said, hey, I want to talk to you guys. I noticed you're in here all the time. And I see, you know, your literature, you have this African Liberation Day. I wanted to see if we can meet with you and talk about how we could further refine what you're putting out there. We can make it look really nice. And, you know, we have packages that can work. And we're looking at that and we were grinning. We were like, these capitalists are really something, man. I mean, they don't even care that the message on our literature is about overthrowing the system. They're like, I see an opportunity to make some money, so I'm going to take advantage of that. So that's who we're dealing with. That's who you're dealing with right here. We got to go back to independent, where we're not contingent upon these people or dependent upon these people. And then we have to keep the focus as it has historically been before the corporate sponsorship, which has been, again, creating a vision for our true liberation. Any commemoration that's not talking about that is not really concerned about our people. It's not concerned about our people unless it's talking about our forward progress and our collective liberation. not our collective integration into the capitalist system, our collective liberation, independent of the capitalist system. If it ain't talking like that, it's a farce, it's a scam. And only our red, black, green, and gold, we'll settle for red, black, and green, but only those two flags, which are different versions of the African flag, those are the only flags that should ever be flying at any kind of Juneteenth commemoration. That's it. You see that damn red, white, and blue U.S. flag around, if you can get away with it, take it down, stomp on it, and burn the hell out of it. It shouldn't be a Juneteenth. That's so disrespectful to our ancestors. They were not flying that flag like those of us who have it today are flying it. They were not doing that. They might have had some, but it was a totally different understanding as to why they had it. They certainly weren't as confused then as we are today. So we should be flying. We have to bring nationalism back to this today. We can't be taken in by Wells Fargo and Bank of America and making it some corporate BS. It has to be nationalism. So that's important. And no people who promote the capitalist system can represent Juneteenth. So all these corporations and politicians and all, they have no place at Juneteenth. They have absolutely no place at Juneteenth. Why do I say that? Because they are not in a position, even if they're well-meaning, they're not in a position to foster an agenda that perpetuates the collective liberation of our people. So instead of advancing them, we should have organizations represented there who are doing that work so that our people can know who those organizations are and get information from them and join them and help build their capacity. That's the purpose of Juneteenth. I remember that when I was a kid. I remember all the white left groups used to come. Like at that time, there was the Communist Party USA and the Socialist Workers Party. And they used to, try to bogart the events because they wanted to organize African people, and the African organizations would stop them from doing that. I remember one time when I was a kid, they tried to come in there, 3 or 4 of them, sell their paper, and the Spartacus League was one of them, and they had the Nation of Islam was co-sponsored. They had the Fruit of Islam brothers out there, and I remember the white boys tried to push through the FOI. That was a very serious error. Someone said something to me, and I looked around, and the 3 white boys from the Spartacus League were on the ground. And I'm like, I was a kid, and I was like, wow, I'm sorry that happened to them. But even as a child, I understood that those Africans were trying their best to preserve the dignity and integrity of our culture. That's all they were trying to do. And those people didn't want to listen. They didn't respect that, so they paid the price. And I think it's an utter shame that we have let the work of those Africans go to waste by selling out our culture to the slave master today. Juneteenth is for the masses of African people worldwide. And any true commemoration of it has to start and end there. So Juneteenth cannot just be talking about getting a paycheck from the slave master in the United States of America. That's not Juneteenth. That's a farce. Juneteenth can only have value if it is connected to the worldwide struggle for African people to reclaim our dignity. And Juneteenth is a commemoration that is the African in the U.S. manifestation of the worldwide struggle for African liberation. The Haitian Revolution is the manifestation for Africans in Haiti for the worldwide African Revolution, and so on and so forth. And if it's not that, it ain't serving our purpose. It's serving somebody else's agenda. It's serving somebody else's purpose. So we have to make sure that we ensure that that does not happen, you all, and that we regain the integrity of Juneteenth. We reclaim it. So as you go to these commemorations, raise questions with people. Have conversations. We're not, we use humor, but we're really not advocating for you to go and disrupt these commemorations, because that wouldn't do any good. And we're revolutionaries. We want positive change. We're not just trying to get a disruption and then the event continues after you get arrested and beat up. That doesn't serve our people. So rather than that, what we're advocating is have conversations about the material we're talking about today as you go to these commemorations. Have conversations with people. Make sure people understand the contradiction. Raise that with them, because I guarantee you most of them don't. They think the corporate sponsored model of Juneteenth is how it's always been. They don't know anything about the independent and militant commemoration of Juneteenth that I talked about. They don't know anything about that. They think the corporation, because everything they know is the corporate model. Corporations have provided them all the information they know. So that's why they're so docile. And if you talk loud, they're worried, because that's the corporate model. We've been trained to be obedient slaves. And it's important we have conversations with people and help people understand that that's not who we need to be, nor should it be who we want to be. And that's all we're saying as you go to these commemorations. Have these conversations with people. It's very important. The conversations help change the culture. And if you are in an organization and you have an organizational stance on this that's radical, revolutionary, then that's even better, because that gives an analysis like what we bring in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So let's get to work and make sure that happens. Let's make sure that happens, that we're always constantly doing that. So we want to say thank you for coming today. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we want to invite you to come back next week, Sunday, June 18th. It's so-called Father's Day. So we want you to come back on that day. We're going to be talking about the immortal Kwame Ture. We're going to talk about the legacy of Kwame Ture, the immortal Kwame Ture. I couldn't think of a more appropriate Father's Day topic. So come back next week and join us for that. And we want you to go to the APRP Forward Ever shop and buy what you can. And please tell people about it. I don't know how many of you actually tell people about this stuff. I wish that you would. It's the minimum that you can do to advance the struggle. It's very important. You should be planning to tell at least one person a week about this program, the other programs in the APRP, about what we offer in terms of our organizing work, like the APRP Forward Ever shop. 4 people a month? You can't talk to 4 people a month? I mean, come on, you could talk to 3 of them on the street. So please do that and join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to aprp-intl.org and join the party, or join some other organization, or start one of your own. And abetterworld.me, all of these videos are there. You can get them there. You can look at them, spread them around. Help us, please. Help us. We cannot do this without your help. We appreciate those of you that do help us. The money we raise for this program for African Liberation Day is very much appreciated. We appreciate each and every one of you. Please continue to. We're not asking you for money. We're not going to do that for a while. We don't have any reason to, but we will ask you to help us spread our work. And these ways I'm describing to you are the ways you do that. Let people know, if you see our screen, all of the programs on the bottom of the screen, please help people know those programs so that they can do that. And I want to encourage you, buy more copies of my book, and please let people know about the book, A Guide for Organized Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Bring me to wherever you are to talk about the book, because the proceeds that come from that is what I use to do the work that we're doing. Like last weekend, I mentioned last Sunday, I was there training people on how to protect themselves from fascists who were threatening them. And I'm doing that work again very shortly, in another week or two. And, I bought myself materials, knee pads, elbow pads. I used the money from that book there on your screen to do that. So and also for my training efforts, to go out, the materials I use, I reproduce, the gasoline to get there, all of those things. So A Guide for Organized Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Please buy it, continue to buy it. Please tell people to buy it. It's a good book. We appreciate you. Forward ever, backwards never. Don't be discouraged. We are winning. The reason why you're discouraged is our enemies don't want you to know we're winning, but we are winning. Stay strong, stay up. You are beautiful. We appreciate you. We love you. Forward ever.